Have you ever felt like you just need to disappear for a while, but you're not sure exactly why? Maybe you've started avoiding conversations, disappearing from social media, declining invitations, all for no clear reason. People ask if you're okay. You say yes, but deep down, something inside you is asking for silence. A silence so deep, you can't even name it. What if I told you that this isn't weakness? That this urge to retreat isn't a mistake, but a spiritual calling? Maybe you're not broken. Maybe you're just in the process of being reborn. Rumi said, "Don't look outside for what can only be cured inside." And yet we spend our lives trying to find solace in the voices of the world, in distractions, in temporary affections, in promises that are never fulfilled. But there comes a time when everything loses its flavor. The routine weighs on us. Words grow weary. Connections feel empty. It is at this moment that your soul begins to whisper, "Come back home." The soul only blossoms when you withdraw, and withdrawing isn't disappearing. It's not giving up. It's turning inward. It's giving your essence the sacred space it needs to breathe. But almost no one understands this, because we live in a world where presence is confused with performance, where disappearing is seen as weakness, and slowing down is synonymous with defeat. But Rumi reminds us, the wound is the place where the light enters, and sometimes the light can only come in when you step away from the crowd and allow the darkness to embrace you. This video is not for those looking for quick answers. It's for you, who feel that something is changing inside, who feels a silent restlessness, an emptiness that doesn't hurt, but that also doesn't go away. You feel like you're moving away from everything, but in fact, you're moving closer to yourself. And that's where it all begins. Stay until the end, because in this video, we'll walk through this sacred space where the soul falls silent, to finally blossom. If what I've said so far has touched some silent part of you, write in the comments, "I am blooming in silence." This phrase isn't just symbolic, it's a declaration, a reminder that your withdrawal isn't absence. It's a process of rebirth that few can comprehend. Leaving a comment here is more than just interacting with the video. It's affirming that you're choosing to listen to yourself, that you're making room for your soul to flourish, away from the noise of the world. It's creating an invisible thread between you and other souls who are also on this same path of healing, retreat, and transformation. And if this message made sense to you, if it brought clarity, relief, or even that strange feeling of being read from the inside, then I ask you, leave your like, not just as support, but as a signal to the algorithm that this type of content needs to reach more people who are lost in the chaos, and who perhaps, like you, just need a spiritual boost to understand what they're feeling. And don't forget to subscribe. This channel isn't just about videos. It's a refuge, a space for emotional healing and spiritual awakening inspired by Rumi. Each week, a new key, a new perspective, a new chance to reconnect with who you truly are. So write in the comments, like, subscribe, because when you engage, you strengthen that space and help create a sacred field where more people can flourish, even in silence. And now, let's go deeper, because what you feel isn't weakness. It's called. It's time to understand what really happens when your soul decides to withdraw. Have you ever felt surrounded by people, yet profoundly alone? Have you ever noticed how the noise of the world builds up inside your mind, to the point where you can no longer hear your own thoughts? There comes a time when the noise outside invades everything inside. You wake up tired. You feel the weight of being alive, but without clarity about why. Your energy is drained by empty conversations, soulless routines, the constant demands of a world that never stops. And in the midst of this, your soul begins to wither. It's at this point that many think they're depressed or believe they're missing something. But in fact, they're being called, not by something external, but by a deep, forgotten part of them. A part that's tired of surviving by trying to please everyone while dying inside. This emotional exhaustion, this weariness that won't go away, this desire to disappear, maybe it's not a psychological problem. Maybe it's spiritual. You try to stay strong, present, productive, smiling at others, responding to messages, pretending everything's fine. But inside, all you want is silence, not to sleep, but to exist. Silence to remember who you were before molding yourself to others' expectations. Silence to hear yourself again. Maybe you think you're running away from everything, sabotaging yourself, or withdrawing from the world. But what if it's the opposite? What if you're actually trying to return home? There's a pain no one sees, a pain you've learned to hide even from yourself, a longing that isn't for anyone, but for you, for what your soul was like before it was crushed by external pressures, before the disappointments, before the wounds, before the masks. This is the pain of being disconnected from yourself. And no one tells you this. No one tells you that sometimes the soul needs to retreat to survive. We live in a culture that glorifies exposure. The more you show, the more you talk, the more you appear, the more you are validated. But there are souls who no longer want to be seen. They want silence. They want seclusion. They want space to breathe without being judged. The world shouts, demands, compares, pushes. And you feel like, every day, you have to run faster to stay afloat. But what if true progress is to stop, to step away, to hide for a while, to blossom in peace? Rumi said, the soul has its own journey, and that journey doesn't always make sense to the outsider. When you start to withdraw, people ask if you're okay. When you're silent, they say you're acting strange. When you don't respond, they think you're disinterested. But you know better. You know that what's happening inside is greater than any explanation. You're undergoing an invisible rebirth. It's hard to explain to others what you don't even fully understand. How do you say you need silence but you're not sad? That you're disappearing from social media, but you're not feeling down? That you're more introspective, but you're not depressed? How do you explain that what you feel has no name? It's just a calling. A void that isn't pain, but it isn't peace either. It's an in-between space. A suspended space where nothing seems to make sense, and yet everything seems sacred. This in-between place is where the soul prepares to blossom, but it's also where many people give up, because it's uncomfortable, it's lonely, it's strange, and no one prepared you for this. They told you you had to always be well, always active, always in motion. But true soul growth happens when everything seems at a standstill, when you don't know what to do, when all that's left is to feel. That's where the invisible problem lies. It's not the pain you feel. It's the fact that no one understands what you're going through. No one sees the effort it takes to wake up and exist when everything inside you is asking for silence. When your soul no longer wants noise, no longer wants distraction, no longer wants to rush. It only wants peace. It only wants truth. It only wants to blossom. But to blossom, it must first retreat. Maybe you're there right now, sitting in silence, watching this video, searching for some word that will help you understand what's happening inside you. And I want to tell you that what you're feeling is real. You're not going crazy. You're not losing yourself. You're, for the first time, listening to your soul. And it's asking for space, it's asking for time, it's asking for retreat. Not because it's weak, but because it's about to transform. And if this makes sense to you, if this video is translating something you didn't even know how to put into words, write in the comments, "My soul is asking for silence." This phrase may seem small, but it's an act of courage, a sign that you're ready to look within, and maybe, just maybe, begin to blossom in your own time. Rumi reveals, the soul has its own journey, and sometimes, it needs solitude to remember who it is. And this phrase carries a spiritual weight that most are unprepared to carry, because we've been taught to fear silence. We've been told that when everything gets too quiet, something is wrong, that withdrawing from people is a sign of weakness, that those who choose to be alone are running away from something. But what if it's just the opposite? What if the soul can only truly breathe when it withdraws? What if retreat is the sacred language of your spirit, asking to be heard without interruptions? We've been taught to fill every empty space with distractions. If there's silence, we turn on the television. If there's loneliness, we open our cell phones. If there's pain, we look for someone to soothe it. But the soul doesn't scream. It whispers. It reveals itself in the gaps between thoughts, in the pauses between commitments, in that moment when you stop and feel something much greater wanting to emerge. And almost no one has the courage to listen to this. The spiritual root of your pain may not lie in something that happened outside, but in how much you've ignored what's pulsing within. How many times have you felt disconnected but pretended everything was fine? How many times have you forced your presence into places that empty you, just because it felt right? And how many times have you silenced your intuition, just to maintain a semblance of normalcy? The soul can't stand disguises for long. It begins to sicken. Sadness sets in without cause. Your body weighs heavily. The emptiness grows, and you don't understand why. It is at this point that the call of solitude becomes inevitable, because the soul needs space to remember who it is. It needs the absence of noise, pressure, and masks to finally see itself. Rumi said, "When you sit in silence with the soul, it begins to tell you who you are." But who these days can sit in silence with themselves without feeling anguish? We are so accustomed to escaping, to filling time, that we forget the value of simply stopping and listening. Not with our ears, but with our spirit. What hurts often isn't loneliness itself. It's the resistance to it. The soul wants to take you inward, but the ego resists. It wants movement, control, certainty. The soul, however, wants surrender, presence, and truth. And this internal conflict generates tension, anxiety, and a constant feeling of being out of place. It's not the world that's against you. It's you trying to live at a pace that's no longer yours. It's like wearing clothes that no longer fit, insisting they still represent you, but they no longer do, because you've changed, and your soul is trying to show you that. This shift is subtle but profound. Suddenly, conversations that once interested you now tire you. Environments that once excited you now oppress you. Relationships that once fulfilled you now feel empty, and you wonder what's happening. But it's not a crisis. It's an awakening. It's the beginning of a new phase where the soul begins to seek what truly has meaning. And to do so, it needs to retreat. Retreat is the most sacred form of reunion. It's not isolation, it's reconnection. It's not escape, it's reintegration. When you begin to listen to your soul, you realize that everything you sought outside, love, security, belonging, was inside all along. But it needed silence to be accessed, because the soul doesn't compete with noise. It waits for you to silence the world before it manifests itself. Rumi said that the wound is the place where the light enters. But before the light can enter, space must be made. And space only opens when you accept silence, not as a punishment, but as a blessing. Silence is fertile. It's where the seed of the soul germinates. But this germination doesn't happen under the spotlight. It happens in the dark, in stillness, in seclusion. And that's why so many give up halfway, because they confuse darkness with abandonment. But it's not abandonment. It's gestation. It's rebirth. It's preparation for something much greater to come. But this something greater doesn't come while you insist on following formulas that no longer serve you. It only comes when you surrender, when you stop fighting what you're feeling and start listening. And listening, here, doesn't mean understanding rationally. It means allowing your soul to speak. And it speaks through fatigue, sadness, the desire to disappear, the repulsion toward all that is superficial. These signs are invitations to go deeper, to go within. You're not moving away from the world. You're moving closer to yourself. This is the spiritual root of everything you've been feeling. This is the starting point of a new version of you that is emerging. But it requires you to stop running away from yourself, to embrace silence, to accept solitude not as the absence of love, but as the presence of truth. And if this resonated with what you're experiencing right now, write in the comments, "I need to listen to myself." This simple gesture can be the beginning of your surrender to something much greater. Because when you write, you declare. And when you declare, you begin to allow your soul to blossom again, in its own time, in its own space, in the silence that only you can offer it. What no one told you is that you only blossom when you accept dying to what is no longer you. And this death is not physical, but symbolic. It's the death of masks. It's the end of the versions you constructed just to fit in, just to be accepted, just to avoid abandonment. There's a silent pain that arises every time you keep insisting on being what no longer makes sense. And most people continue living this way because the fear of losing themselves is greater than the courage to find themselves. But the soul can't bear living a lie for long. It begins to whisper, then to scream, and finally, to become ill. The truth is, withdrawing isn't giving up. It's respecting the soul's time. It's distancing yourself from the world not out of cowardice, but out of self-love. It's a spiritual choice, and it's a lonely choice, because almost no one understands. They'll say you're strange, that you're distant, that you've changed. But the truth is you're simply returning to yourself. You're letting everything that was created out of pain die. And that's why it hurts so much. Because you're not just losing people or situations. You're losing parts of yourself that were built to survive. And surviving isn't the same as living. The hidden key is this: the soul needs space to flourish, but before it can flourish, it must shed all that is inauthentic. And this transition is uncomfortable, because it forces you to face truths you've avoided for years. It forces you to reevaluate relationships, patterns, and decisions. It forces you to stop blaming others and start accepting that, often, it was you who betrayed yourself, trying to hold on to something that had long since died. But it is also in this discomfort that healing begins, because all that is true remains, and what was merely an illusion fades away. This retreat is sacred. It's an invisible womb where the new version of who you were meant to be begins to form. And like every gestation process, it's invisible from the outside. It's internal, silent. Almost no one will notice, but you will feel it. You will realize that, even without realizing it, something inside you is changing, that the need to please diminishes, that the fear of being alone begins to give way to a new feeling: peace. And this peace doesn't come because everything has been resolved externally. It comes because you've finally found yourself within. It's important to understand that you don't need to explain this process to anyone, because it's intimate. It's yours. Don't expect applause or understanding. Just keep going. Trust the wisdom of your soul. It knows the path, it knows the time. And it knows that before blossoming, you must accept the end of cycles. You must let go. You must empty yourself. Blossoming doesn't happen in noise. It happens in silence, in surrender, in letting go of old versions. And that's why it's scary, because it makes you feel like you're losing everything. But in truth, you're opening yourself up to receive everything that truly belongs to you. How many times have you tried to sustain a role that no longer fit you? How many times have you forced yourself to smile, to be present, to carry on, even when everything inside screamed for a break? This persistence tires the soul, and it begins to shut down. It begins to withdraw, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom, because it understands that there are times when continuing is truly giving up. Continuing to be someone you're not is the deepest form of self-betrayal, and the soul feels it. You might be there right now, feeling this weariness that won't go away, this desire to disappear but not wanting to die, this feeling that the world has become too small for what you feel. And that's okay. This is the beginning. This is the sign that something inside is awakening, that you're ready to blossom. But first, you have to die. You have to let go of what no longer pulses. You have to trust that there is life after the end, that there is beauty after the darkness, that there is light, even in the darkest places of the soul. Rumi said that darkness is the womb of light, that chaos is the beginning of creation. And when you accept entering this invisible womb, when you accept retreating without haste, without guilt, something begins to happen. Little by little, you feel the energy shift. You feel the weight lift. You feel a strength within you that doesn't depend on anyone, that doesn't need approval, applause, or explanations. It's the strength of those who finally allow themselves to be, of those who are tired of surviving and have chosen to flourish. And if you feel like you're in that process right now, write in the comments, "I allow my old self to die." This is your spiritual declaration of surrender, not to the end, but to the beginning. Because by letting die what is no longer you, you are making room for truth, for light, for the silent rebirth of your soul. Perhaps you're quieter today, not out of pride nor anger, but because your words can no longer convey what's happening inside you. It's a silence that isn't empty. It's a silence that holds something precious. You observe the world around you, people coming and going, talking loudly, seeking distractions, rushing to avoid feeling. And there you are, silent, not because you're discouraged by life, but because something very deep is in the process of transformation. And you know it, even if you can't explain it, even if no one understands. You try to maintain your routine. You do what needs to be done. But at the same time, there's a part of you that's no longer present there, as if you're living with one foot here and the other somewhere invisible. A place where there's no obligation to be strong all the time, where your soul isn't demanded, just welcomed, where everything you feel makes sense. And in this place, you're germinating. You're preparing for something that hasn't arrived yet, but that already pulses within you. Maybe you've distanced yourself from some friendships. Maybe you no longer feel like being in certain environments. Maybe what once excited you now seems superficial. This isn't disinterest. This is clarity. It's your soul saying, I don't belong here anymore. And there's nothing wrong with that. A flower, before blooming, closes itself. It withdraws. It protects itself. Because it knows something delicate is forming. It needs darkness, stillness, the right timing. And you, at this moment, are like that flower. It's no wonder you've been feeling strange, because you're letting go of who you've always been, to become who you truly are. And this process is lonely, painful at times, but incredibly liberating, because little by little, you begin to realize you no longer need to pretend, that you no longer need to force yourself into small spaces, that you no longer need to maintain conversations that don't nourish, relationships that don't welcome, cycles that don't heal. Maybe you're in the middle of this process right now. Maybe you woke up today feeling more sensitive, more introspective, more connected to yourself. Maybe you can't explain it to anyone, but you feel different, that something has changed, that a new lightness is arriving even if slowly. And this is a sign that your soul is blossoming, quietly, slowly, but truly. This blossoming doesn't need to be displayed. It doesn't need to be understood by others. It's intimate. It's yours. It's a spiritual transformation that happens deep within the soul, like roots that grow in the darkness before the plant emerges. No one sees it, but it's there, forming, strengthening, preparing to sustain something much greater. You don't need to rush, you don't need to pressure yourself, just trust. Trust the rhythm of your soul. Trust this process that, strange as it may seem, is taking you exactly where you need to be. And even if everything around you still seems the same, you are no longer the same. Because now you know that this silence carries meaning, that this withdrawal has purpose, that this phase of retreat is not a setback, but a preparation. And maybe no one notices. Maybe no one appreciates your courage to look within. But the soul knows, it feels, and it blossoms, even if the world doesn't see it. Because true blossoming doesn't need an audience. It just needs presence, truly, surrender. So if you're going through this right now, if this description touched something you couldn't quite put your finger on, please write in the comments, I am blooming in the invisible. This phrase isn't just symbolic. It's a silent testament that you're listening to your soul, that you're respecting your time. And that, even in silence, even hidden, even still in process, you are flourishing. You are not alone, even though it may sometimes feel like you are. Even though in the midst of your silent nights and confused thoughts, you feel as if no one in the world can understand what's happening inside you. But this feeling doesn't mean abandonment. It means transition, a sacred interval between what you no longer are and what is yet to be born. And in this in-between space, the soul speaks softly. It doesn't demand, it invites. It invites you to retreat, to pause, to encounter what truly matters. Your soul is leading you to the place where healing happens in silence. And this silence, though frightening at first, is where everything begins to make sense. Rumi said, with silence, the flower blooms. And you are that flower. A flower that spent too long trying to bloom in arid soil, amidst noise, excess, the pressure to be for others what it never managed to be for itself. But now it's different. Now you begin to realize that true transformation doesn't scream, doesn't show, doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. It simply happens, like a hidden, intimate, powerful blossoming. And this is the shift in consciousness. The moment you stop seeing yourself as lost and begin to recognize yourself as someone in gestation. You are not broken. You are being reborn. Accepting retreat as an act of courage is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Because everything around you pushes you outward. It demands explanations, presence, performance. But there's something inside you that no longer accepts these impositions. Something that demands silence, space, truth. And that something is your soul. It's more alive than ever. And even silently, it's crying out for freedom. The freedom to be who you are, without fear, without disguise, without the obligation to fit in. Retreat isn't weakness. It's resistance. It's living spirituality. It's the courage to distance yourself from the world so as not to distance yourself. This shift happens slowly. Sometimes it seems like nothing has changed, but suddenly, you begin to realize that what once hurt you no longer affects you in the same way. that certain voices no longer affect you, that certain absences no longer hurt. You begin to realize that a new center is emerging within you, an inner place where peace resides, where clarity resides, where a kind of love you've never experienced before resides. Love for yourself, a love that demands no conditions, that doesn't depend on validation, a love that blossoms in silence, away from the eyes of the world. And it is precisely there, in that silence, that you find your strength, because you no longer need to shout to be heard, no longer need to run to be seen, no longer need to beg for attention, presence, care. You begin to be self-sufficient, not out of pride, but out of truth, because for the first time, you are choosing yourself. You are staying with yourself. You are allowing the process to unfold, even without knowing where it will lead. And that is freedom, the deepest freedom. You begin to see beauty where before you saw only pain. You begin to feel lightness where before there was heaviness. You begin to realize that what seemed like an end was actually the beginning of a completely new path. A path where you don't need to be someone else to be loved. A path where silence is an answer, not an absence. Where retreat is healing, not an escape. Where being alone is a blessing, not a punishment. And on this new path, you flourish. Not through effort, but through surrender. This is the turning point that changes everything. When you stop resisting what you feel and start listening. When you understand that you no longer need to fight your soul. When you finally surrender to what has always been trying to find you. And the most beautiful thing about this is that even without anyone seeing you feel, even without anyone understanding you know, even without having all the answers, you trust. Because something inside you has awakened. Something that never goes back to sleep. Something that firmly says, now I choose to blossom. If you've made it this far, it's because something within you resonated with this message. And this is no coincidence. Your soul is awakening, and you are answering the call. So write in the comments, I flourish in silence. This is your spiritual declaration, your silent signal that you are ready to listen, to withdraw, and to transform. Subscribe to the channel now to continue walking with me on this journey of deep healing and inner awakening. Each video is a key, a breath of fresh air, a reminder of who you truly are. And if you felt this video touched parts of you that were dormant, please leave a like, not just as a gesture of support, but as a symbol that you honor this silent and sacred process. And now, delve even deeper into your soul by watching the next video that's appearing here on the screen. It's the continuation of this journey. The soul doesn't need to be found, it needs to be felt. And this is just the beginning.